I still remember that day. I stood in front of my rental room, reduced to charred black ruins by the fire. I didn't cry, I just smiled, hollow and defeated. The air was thick with the stench of burnt soot. After the firefighters put out the flames, black sewage covered the floor, sticking to my every step. My mom stood in the narrow hallway, her face soaked with tears. Parts of her skin were scorched, and a large patch of her hair was singed by the fire. Her hands shook violently as she tightly clutched a phone, already deformed and melted by the flames. No one could give her an answer. No one could explain why the whole room burned to ruins just because she stepped out for a few minutes. But I knew exactly what happened. Hi, I'm Gui. In my previous videos, a lot of you have asked me in the comments, the pandemic's long over, so why do I still wear a mask all the time? I have two reasons. First, a lot of people here spit and smoke outdoors, which ruins the air quality. I have rhinitis, so I'm really sensitive to irritants like these. Second, masks simply make me feel safer, especially when I'm walking through the urban village where I live. I've mentioned I carry a dark, heavy past. Today, I've finally decided to speak about it openly. This experience completely changed me and shaped who I am today. This all happened back in 2013, right after I graduated. I was living in an urban village in my hometown. My parents rented it for me, a tiny 6 square meter windowless single room. It barely fit a bed and a table, with a shared public toilet outside. The rent was 240 yuan a month, the absolute maximum my struggling family could afford. My very first full-time job was a temporary clerk at a government agency. I only earned 1,500 yuan a month. It was hardly enough to get by, but with no family connections, it was already one of the best opportunities I could land on my own. Most of my classmates had family backing, landing good, stable jobs with ease. But I had no one to rely on but myself. I've always been extremely quiet on my own. But every time my mom came over, we'd end up in arguments. She'd constantly complain about my low salary and unstable temp job, saying I had no future and pressuring me to find something better. Caught up in our fights, we never noticed how thin the walls were. A young man lived right next door with his father. I'd run into him on my way to work occasionally, but I'd always walk fast and keep to myself. Honestly, he always creeped me out. He'd constantly play adult videos out loud in his room, so I'd hear all kinds of noises through the thin walls. I never understood how he could do that while living with his dad. The whole neighborhood could hear it, and it made everyone incredibly uncomfortable. I truly believe that after he overheard how poor and vulnerable I was, he started targeting me. He began coincidentally running into me far too often every single morning. One day, he blocked me right at the entrance of the public toilet. He wore this fake warm smile and said he wanted to be my friend. He even offered to treat me to dinner and take me to an amusement park. I was terrified deep down, with no idea how to react. He blocked the entire doorway, trapping me in place. He just kept pestering me non-stop. To escape that awkward, terrifying situation, I gave him my phone number. I've regretted that decision ever since. My compromise sent him the wrong message. He thought he'd tested my boundaries and found an opening to take advantage of me. But once I stopped answering his calls, ignored him completely, and started leaving home early every morning to avoid him, he lost his patience and eventually snapped. I was far too naive back then. I genuinely thought if I just ignored him, he'd eventually give up and leave me alone. As I've mentioned in my older videos, I was teaching myself English at the time. I spent every day listening to English songs and watching American TV shows. One night, I was lying in bed, fully immersed in The Vampire Diaries. Out of nowhere, I heard a loud, vicious roar coming from the next room. My first instinct was that I'd misheard. I was so immersed in that fictional foreign world that the harsh reality outside felt distant, like it belonged to another dimension. On top of that, in Chinese, the pronouns he and she sound identical. I had no idea who he was threatening. I just lay there frozen for several seconds. Then I tried to convince myself it wasn't true. He wasn't talking about me. Weeks passed and nothing happened. I left home early and came back late. Locked my door the second I stepped inside, and even carried my keys with me every time I went to the public toilet. Slowly, I convinced myself I'd imagined that threat. It's only human instinct, right? We always try to erase terrifying nightmares from our minds. Then my mom moved in with me. She'd quit her factory job and was fighting with my dad, so she had nowhere else to go. She ended up squeezing into that tiny room with me. That morning, I went to work as usual, leaving her asleep in the room. She just stepped out for a quick toilet run and left the door unlocked. It was only 2 or 3 minutes, but by the time she got back, the whole room was on fire. I got her call at work. She was crying, barely able to speak a word. My mind went totally blank. I felt utterly empty, like a huge part of me had been ripped out. By the time I rushed back, the fire had already been put out. Everything was pitch black. Thick, grimy water flooded the floor. all my books, my clothes, my computer, every single thing I'd ever owned turned to ashes. No one knew what caused the fire, and no one cared enough to find out or call the police. The landlord only called the fire department, but refused to get the police involved. I knew exactly why. The rooms were illegally divided. If the police showed up, his rental business would get into trouble. My mom was too traumatized and broken to move a muscle, and I was too defeated to call for help. Deep down, I knew exactly who was behind this, but I had absolutely no proof. By then, he was already long gone, and honestly, I never truly believed the police would ever catch him. Back then, surveillance cameras weren't everywhere like they are today. Long before this fire, back when I was still a naive, foolish college student, life kept knocking me down, again and again. I got scammed several times. Once, it happened to me and some of my classmates. We were furious and frustrated, so we went to the police station near our campus, hoping to get the justice we'd only read about in textbooks. But what happened? The officer just leaned back in his chair, totally unfazed and indifferent. He simply smiled and said, "We won't be able to catch them. Just be smarter next time." My parents gave me barely any living allowance, just enough for basic meals. After I got scammed, I didn't dare tell them. I survived entirely on plain buns and cheap noodles, as if things couldn't get any worse, while I was already broke and struggling to get by. My phone got stolen on the bus. I had no one to turn to, and I still refused to let my parents worry about me. So I took up weekend part-time jobs. I sold beer at night markets, enduring non-stop verbal harassment from male customers. Eventually, I saved enough to buy the exact same phone and pretended nothing bad had ever happened. My parents still have no idea how much I suffered back in college, and I'll never tell them. Even if they knew the truth, they couldn't fix anything. They'd only blame me and feel distressed over what was lost. So, when I stood in front of my completely burnt room that day, my first thought was, "Oh, this cruel fate, coming for me yet again." I couldn't shed a single tear. I was too drained to cry. To everyone around me, I seemed unbelievably calm, mature, and strong for my age. I handled everything step by step. I apologized to the furious landlord, comforted my terrified mom, called my dad, got my mom new glasses, and took her to the hospital to treat her burns. And through all of this, I had a faint, strange smile on my face. It wasn't happiness. It was pure numbness, empty numbness. I was just telling myself, "It's fine. You've not gotten used to this kind of pain." My mom stared at me with her puffy red eyes like I was a total stranger. She must have thought I'd lost my mind. But I wasn't crazy. After more than 2 decades of living, I've learned a cruel lesson. Crying solves nothing. Tears will never fix anything or make life easier. The only thing you can do is pretend you are fine. Bury your scars deep down and let them either heal or fester on their own. That fire didn't just burn my belongings. It burned away the last bit of innocence I had left for the world. Years have passed, and much has changed, but 2 things have never changed. I still can't afford to move out of these urban villages, to live in a safer, better neighborhood. I'm still a single woman living alone, one of the most vulnerable groups in this society. Every day, walking through these narrow, dark alleys, I still instinctively avoid strangers' stares. I still hide myself, keep a low profile, and do everything I can to stay invisible. So, what has changed? A part of me died in that fire. That weak, timid girl who let people walk all over her, she is gone for good. She is 36 now. If she ever faces this kind of harm or harassment again, no matter who the person is, she will fight back with everything she has. She will use the law, and if she has to, she will fight fire with fire. Even if it ends in mutual destruction, she will never back down again.